Now, having said that, I think it's really wrong to think that the problem's about some psychopath named Pickton, Willie Pickton, who had to kill prostitutes. He's just one of many people who have preyed on prostitutes. In fact, the original serial killer, the modern serial killer of the 19th century, Jack the Ripper, all his victims were prostitutes. I never remember these details, certain things I like to repress. But listen to this hall of infamy. You got Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper in the late 70s, 13 victims. Arthur Shawcross, 10 victims in the late 1980s in the Rochester area. Joel Rifkin, it was that Seinfeld episode, remember about they're caught paging Joel Rifkin? I didn't know who it was, but he was a serial killer in New York, 9 victims. And then at the same time they're digging up the pig farm victims, they catch Gary Ridgway, the most prolific serial killer in the United States, 48 victims. I know there's others who claim more, but documented, he's the most prolific. They couldn't catch him. All his victims were sex trade workers, and he gave a statement when he was condemned to life imprisonment that tells you the problem and tells you why the law has to be more sensitive to the issue. Ridgway says this, says it all. I picked prostitutes as my victims because I hate most prostitutes, and I did not want to pay them for sex. That's how simple it can be. But here's where the law gets implicated. I also picked prostitutes as victims because they were easy to pick up without being noticed. I knew they would not be reported missing right away and might never be reported missing. I picked prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted to without getting caught. And he was right. And why don't these people get caught? The clearance rate on murders of sex workers is running around 30%. The clearance rate for murders of people like you and me is usually around 85% or 75%. We clear a lot of murders because it's a very serious crime, but not when it comes to sex workers. So the reality is, there is these mission-oriented serial killers that do troll the streets of North America, not as much in Europe, England too, looking for vulnerable women who work the streets. And if you think Pickton is our Canadian representative of this problem, let me give you some other numbers right now about the so-called occupation at risk, which StatsCan calls it. Project CARE is going on right now, an RCMP project between Edmonton and Calgary, 80 missing women. By the way, they won't say they're sex workers. They call women in high-risk professions. I cross-examine them. It's like, okay, what, hot dog vendor? You know, no, but high risk, well, they couldn't name one other than sex work. The Highway of Tears, you may have heard up, running up the coast of British Columbia, 18 to 32 missing women. The Winnipeg Task Force was set up 2 years ago to look for 75 women who've gone missing in that region. And I remember Toronto. I remember this well before I even thought of these issues. I remember Victoria Day, 1996. A guy named Marcello De Palma killed 3 sex workers, I believe, in Parkdale in 1 hour. And then when he was caught, a few days later, he said the same thing that Gary Ridgway said. It's okay, I was, quote, getting rid of street scum. So you've got to take that into account as a legislature, that that's the reality that sex workers live in. Whether you like sex work, you condemn it, it doesn't matter. This is a reality people live in, and it's government's responsibility to protect its citizens. But people say to me, you know, get over it, Alan. Life is full of cruelty. It's full of horrors. There's lots of predators. There's lots of psychopaths. Why are you blaming the government for the actions of people like Gary Ridgway or Joel Rifkin? I'm not blaming the government for their actions. I recognize that the person ultimately responsible is the predator. But listen to the way the law is implicated in this horror. It's directly implicated because the 3 provisions that we invalidated all make it difficult for somebody to protect themselves. And again, regardless of what your moral perspective is, we all have equal protection of the law and the right to protect ourselves. So, John Crosby's baby, communication. I mean, what is that? You can't talk to make a deal? We all have that little spidey sense. Okay, I know it's like 30 seconds, 20 seconds. How are you? How's your evening? Based on that, you make informed decisions about whether that's Pickton's car or a regular John's car. I don't care that it's not that effective. It's not like a screening test and you sit down and I like to ask you questions about your background. It's enough that you are given the ability to talk and the law's saying no. The law's saying jump in the car. That's what the law is telling you. If you want to avoid criminal prosecution, jump in the car and hope for the best. Okay, that's a problem. Now, the law also says you can't move indoors and run a business, even for yourself. Forget big businesses, because that's called a bawdy house. Well, let me tell you what the problem is when you prohibit indoor locations. Let's go back to Picton and the problem on the street. Professor John Lohman tells this story in our case of a place called Grandma's House, where when women were disappearing in the downtown Lower East Side, some of the sex workers got together and said, we're going to rent a location here, and we're going to open it up as a safe house for the street workers to come and turn their tricks here. And it made a lot of sense because people were scared as women were going missing. I don't remember how long it took, but the police shut it down as a bawdy house. So you can see how the judge found the law to be overbroad. Even when people are just doing the bare minimum to help themselves and their physical security, the law is saying, no, that's still against the law. The third section we knocked out, living on the avails, which is usually called a classic pimping section. It's not about pimping. First of all, most sex workers in Canada are independent operators. That's what the statistics show. There are some really nasty psychopaths called pimps out there who exploit sex workers. But living on the avails applies to anybody who provides a service. So if I'm your driver or your bodyguard on an out-call escort, I'm living on your avails by taking your money. Well, the reality is, it's pretty lonely, hard work to do everything alone. And there is some inherent violence in these sexual transactions. So it's good to have somebody as a bodyguard or security. The whole basis of this case for me was about moving indoors where there's a receptionist and a bodyguard, where things can be screened ahead of time, and as they have in some of the situations in Nevada and New South Wales and things like that, they have rooms with panic buttons. There's ways to protect people if you have the will. So in 2001, there was an escort agency charged with living on the avails. The case is called Barrow. And the sex workers and the managers said, listen, we provide a supportive environment for the sex workers. We give them health education, we supply a lot of material assistance to them, and we protect them. And the Court of Appeal said this, and this is going to be my favorite part of next Monday. The Court of Appeal said, we hear you, but the law is the law, and the law says you just can't help people. Maybe you should challenge the law constitutionally. I'm just so excited to read that. I just look at them for a moment and say, I'm here. Okay. So we're going to follow the suggestion of the OCA and try to get this thing upheld in the Court of Appeal. The sort of objections that have been raised since the case was successful have been sort of strange. And I have been accused of trying to destroy the fabric of Canadian society. And man, I wish there was an award for that. And by the way, the first objection is coming actually from newspapers and media. I was surprised. They're very supportive. I find media is generally very libertarian in their perspective. But they have this thing in their head where they're saying, Himmel did the right thing, but it shouldn't be Himmel. How dare one single person, one judge, change the entire legal landscape of Canada? It's like, whoa. That doesn't make any sense to me. But it's that objection that a non-elected elite judge shouldn't control the law. Well, and this is Harper's position, why he hates the Charter. Gives too much power to judges. They don't understand what happened. Justice Himmel did nothing. She's in the demolition team, okay? All she did was invalidate some bad laws and invite the government to replace them. And guess what? The government can come back very punitive. Don't think this case is going to change the sex trade forever. It needs a response from the government of Canada. So all Justice Himmel did was create what we call a constitutional dialogue. Here's my view on the validity of the law. Do something about it. But of course the government doesn't want to do something about it. It's that abortion hot potato they got again. They don't want to touch this, so they're just going to blame the judge for speaking her mind about the validity of the law.